I was afraid maybe they'll have bad dreams. What do I tell fifth graders?
Yes.
But they gave me from 10 to 11 to speak in the morning. So I started to speak 10, 11, 12. The school bell was ringing and none of the kids were budging. They didn't want to get up. The school teacher had to chase them out to go for lunch. But instead of going for lunch to the cafeteria, they surrounded me in the hallway with questions, and they just wanted to touch me. And this is when I realized, Ben, we cannot be silent. The world has to know exactly what went on. And from that point on, I also moved to Las Vegas from Los Angeles. In Las Vegas, I joined the Holocaust Survivors Group of Southern Nevada, and they needed speakers. So I volunteered, and I'm still speaking. I have not stopped speaking almost daily. The kids were flabbergasted. They were glued to their chairs. They couldn't get enough of it. They wanted to hear more. And in the hallway, they asked me all kind of questions because they didn't have a chance to ask me while I spoke. But from this point on, I realized we cannot keep silent. The world has to know. They have to know what hatred produces. From hatred, it goes to killing. Now, the Nazis and Hitler did not start with killing. It all started with hate propaganda. And this is how it began. And look what happened with hatred. Ordinary civilized people of Germany turned to become hate and to become killers. Those were educated, highly sophisticated people. How does this happen? So it shows you what hatred will produce. So the hatred has to stop. Why hate? We are all God's creation. Why can't we live side by side? And I tell them, when you go home tonight, hug your parents, your mother, father, your brothers, sisters. Don't take them for granted. And it helps when these kids go home, they do exactly that. And some of the parents call me and they tell me, Mr. Lesser, what you did to our son is unbelievable. He never hugged us or kissed us when he came home from school. Mm-hmm. But he did that day. And from that day on, he hugs us all the time. He appreciates them. When they hear my story, I lost my parents. And out of a family of 7, only 2 of us survived. 5 of them were slaughtered by the Nazis. Now, these Nazis were ordinary people like you and I. What happened? Why did they become killers? Hatred. Hatred, if you hate strong enough, it will lead to where you can kill, especially if it's legal to kill. They don't have to be responsible. There's no accountability. You just kill. In fact, they thank you. You killed a Jew, thank you. I lived in a ghetto almost 2 years, about 1.5 years. And ghetto living was awful. To describe, I don't know if you want to know how we lived there, but it was awful. Every so often they would come in the Nazis would come in and pull out people, fill out trucks, and I don't know where they took them. In the middle of the night, they would come into Bochnia Ghetto and pull out the children from their beds and throw them into these trucks. And they filled up 2 or 3 trucks. They started to pull out of the ghetto. Well, you can imagine the parents were screaming for their children and running behind these trucks. But these cultured people had machine guns at the end of each truck. So they mowed down the parents running behind the trucks, screaming for their children. That happened 2 or 3 times. So Bochnia Ghetto had a very bad reputation. But when I was there, I went through one of those oblavas, they call it, one of those raids in Bochnia Ghetto, and I was hiding. And I heard all my neighbors being torn apart by German Nazi dogs, in the shooting and the screaming. And we were hiding between 2 walls, but the outside of the walls were connected. So they couldn't see us, but the roof was open and we can hear, and it was snowing, freezing cold. Next morning we went out and we couldn't believe what we saw. That people torn apart by dogs laying there. A mother torn apart with their baby in her hand. And people were going around in push carts, picking up these bodies and put the pieces of bodies and put it in a push cart. They took them in Ghetto Square, they piled them up, and then the cultured people came with gasoline cans, poured gasoline, and they had the Bochnia Ghetto human bonfire. Imagine that. That's the screaming. Some of the people were still part alive. And oh my God, I can't believe what went on. It was 13 and a half, maybe. Everyone had to work in the ghetto. If you didn't work, you didn't get any rations. Okay, my job was to sew on buttons on a uniform. Now, it was not a bad job. It was easy to do, but 13 hours a day, very little food. Oh my God. What can I tell you? And every night you didn't know what the next day is going to bring. Lucky for us, we had a capo, a Jewish policeman inside the Bochnia Ghetto, who was a friend of my brother-in-law. He told us, save yourselves, because I think there's going to be a raid tonight or tomorrow night. So we were able to hide in these bunkers. Every house, after these trucks would come in and pick out the kids from the bed, every house had a bunker, a hiding place. They call it bunker. That's when I found out that my hiding place was, which I didn't know, was this ornate piece of furniture where you hang your jackets and your coats. When you open the door, you push the clothing apart, the back panel would slide open. There was a hole in the wall, and the 12 of us from the one rooms that we lived in, 12 of us, we were able to crawl through that hole and stand between 2 walls. Lucky for us, the outside of the walls were connected, but it was cold and there's snowing from the top. And we hear shooting, screaming, dogs barking all night long. Towards the morning, we dared to come out. And this is when we found all these people in the snow. half dead pieces of people being picked up in these push carts. It was unbelievable, unbelievable. This was the first ghetto raids that I was in. And also, it wasn't the last one, because in Hungary, I went through another one. My being alive, I have to thank the head of Gestapo of Bochnia. It's a very, very interesting story. His name was Schomburg. I believe Schomburg or Schomburg. Schomburg, I believe, was his name. And he saved my sister and saved about 50 or 60 people from that ghetto. He was in charge of all of Bochnia, the head of Gestapo. It's a story in itself. It's something you really have to read in a book, because it's a long story. He, Schomburg, was executed a couple months later. They found out what he did. The Nazis executed him. So what can I tell you? This was a head of Gestapo who I have my life to thank. You read my book, it will tell you all about it. It's not just me. There were a lot of more people. I don't know if any of those other people survived. We were able, on a double-decker truck, be smuggled out into Czechoslovakia, and from Czechoslovakia to Hungary. It was a double-decker truck. There was coal on top. Between the coal and the chassis, 10 people could lay down like sardines. And he took us to the border of Czechoslovakia, and there was coal on top. The stories are, this is the truck, unbelievable. My father and mother were pulled out, and they were all shot. All 10 people, plus the driver who wasn't Jewish. All 11 people were shot. But when I went through, and my sister and her husband went through first, then I went through with my little brother on the second transport. We were stopped by the Nazis. Soldiers were stopping us. Oh, we were about 1 hour out of Bochnia. Halt! And we can see through the cracks, there were soldiers with rifles. And they were talking to the driver, but the roar of the engine was so loud we couldn't hear what they were saying. And we were sure somebody turned us in, they're gonna kill us. All of a sudden, the truck started to move. So we felt a little better. But when we looked through the crack, we see on a step, on the front cab, on the step, there was a soldier with the rifle. On the other step, there was a soldier with a rifle. Now we heard soldiers walking on top of the coal. This is it. We felt they're taking us to a cemetery or a forest, and they're going to kill us all. They were with us 2 hours, and then they stopped. And we are already saying our prayers. And all of a sudden we hear, Dankeschön, Dankeschön. They were hitchhikers. Imagine, there were about quite a few soldiers there on top of us, on top of the coal, and they didn't know there were 10 Jewish people hiding underneath them. When they walked away, we were like, we were reborn again. We were survived, we were reborn. So many interesting stories I can tell you, but obviously I don't have enough time. But as long as you ask me questions, I will answer them. to describe the inhumanity in that cattle car, 80 people without a toilet. Imagine, there's no way. So we had to use the buckets after the little water was gone. We had to use the bucket to eliminate ourselves. And after those buckets filled up, and they were overflowing now, 3 days, on the third night, we arrived in a place called Ausschnitte. What can I tell you? Most people were filthy, dirty, starving to death. They didn't feed us, nothing at all. But most of the families took along some food, so they kept eating it. Now you can imagine if you eat it and another person doesn't have a piece of bread and they look at you in your face and you're trying to take a little bite, it's terrible. Many times you can't do that. You just take a small bite and you give it to the other person. That's human beings. That's the way we act. We're next to each other, looking at each other. All I know is families were looking out for each other. A mother for the child, the father for the child, whatever. But once we arrived to Auschwitz, the whole world fell apart. It fell apart. I was holding on to my sister Goldie, my little brother Tuli, and they were yelling. Women and children to the right, and men to the left. So they pulled away my sister and my little brother from me. And this is the last time I ever saw them. They went to the gas chambers. Who knew about the gas chamber? We never heard of it. We never heard of it. So people outside the ghetto didn't know what, or outside the camp of Auschwitz or another death camp, people outside didn't know because everybody was being killed. And those people who can still work, they made them work till they died, and they put them in the crematorium. This is unbelievable, but word didn't get out. No one knew about these things. When we arrived into Auschwitz, they had us undress, get out of our shoes and everything. I had diamonds in my shoes. My uncle, after I ran away from Poland, I came to Hungary, in Munkacs, Hungary. My uncle was a wealthy man, and he had a store where he was selling dry goods, for clothing, for suits, for dresses. And above the store, he had a house. He was a wealthy man. And I told him, I says, Uncle, if the Nazis ever come into Hungary, everything will be taken away from you. It would be good if you had some small stuff like diamonds or jewelries that we can hide on us. And he listened to us. He came home one day with boxes full of shoes, a pair of shoes for every member of the family. And he told us that in the heels of the shoes, there are diamonds. So be aware of it. Use it only in a life-threatening situation. And he gave us these shoes. And when we were exported from Munkacs, Hungary, they told us they're taking us to Germany because the German people need workers, and all able-bodied people will be working, and a whole lie story, everything. They took us all to Auschwitz. And they told us to bring along all your valuables, but leave everything else behind, or else they'll shoot you if you hide or something. Anyway, when we arrived in Auschwitz, I had my black shoes on. My uncle had his black shoes on, and my cousin, his son, had the black shoes on with the diamonds. But they told us to get out of our shoes, get undressed. So they got out of their shoes and they left them there. But I decided I'm going to keep them. I have diamonds in there. I'm not going to give them up. So here I am naked and I'm walking over to the barbers with the clippers, and they cut my hair all over the body. They weren't gentle either with the way they cut it, but they didn't say anything about my beautiful black shoes. Now they tell me to go into the bathhouse, the showers, and I go in. No one says anything. I'm wearing my shoes. And when after the showers, when they gave us the striped clothes with the tag number, my number, 41212, they also gave us a pair of shoes with wooden clods, wooden soles, and it was canvas on top. I got on those shoes and I put my shoes with the diamonds under my arm, under my jacket. And anyway, I was able to save them. What I went through in Auschwitz is another story. But after 2 weeks, they sent us to Dernhau, a labor camp. It was a rock quarry. Just as they dynamited the mountain, it was our job with sledgehammers to break him into manageable pieces and throw it into mining carts, run it down the hill where they had a grinding machine to grind it into gravel. Now, that was hard work. Afterwards, we had to push back up the mining carts up on the hill, and we couldn't stop for a minute. I knew my uncle is not going to survive this. So I bribed the chef from the kitchen. He was an inmate and he slept in the same barrack. And I bribed him with the diamonds to give my uncle a job in the kitchen. And he agreed. He took my diamonds and he gave my uncle a job in the kitchen. So it got easier for all of us. Now, every day when we came back from work, we had to line up in the yard of Dernhau, and all the people working, the Jewish people working in the camp, had to come out to be counted. My uncle was working in the kitchen, but he had to come out, so he came in front of me, and they were counting. They were counting and counting and counting, and the commandant comes down. He says, I'm going to teach the Schweinhund a lesson they'll never forget. I'm going to teach these pig dogs a lesson they'll never forget. What happened? 3 inmates escaped. And because of this, he orders his henchmen to pull out every 10th person in line to receive 25 lashes. And as they're counting every 10th person, I can see my uncle who's going to be in front of me, who is in front of me, is going to be at 10. So I push him behind me and I took his place. And they took all of us number 10 in the middle of the yard. In the middle of the yard, they brought down one by one, maybe 2 or 3 feet long stakes, hardwood stakes. And they brought down a sawhorse. This is a sawhorse. And this is what they told us to do. Walk up to the sawhorse, tiptoe, your heel should not touch the ground, bend over, or your stomach cannot touch the 2x4. One man was pulling your trousers hard, the other one was hitting you, and you had to count. If you miscounted, you start from 1 again. If your heels touch the ground, you start from one again. If your stomach touches the 2x4, you start from one again. I was number 4. The first man went up, and obviously he miscounted his heel. He don't ask, start again and again. Finally, he collapsed. When he collapsed, the commandant goes over and he kicks him in the face, get up. He couldn't get up. He pulls out a revolver and shoots him right in the temple. His girlfriend, his Fräulein, was with him. And she walks over and gives him a hug and a kiss, like he just performed a heroic act. He killed a man. I was number 4. Number 2 goes up, the same thing. He couldn't take it. He miscounted this, touched the floor, touched the 2x4. He started again and again. He falls. The commandant goes over and shoots him. So we have 2 dead people. The third man comes up the same way, but he was younger. And after they told him again and again, he screams out, "Please don't kill me, have mercy on me." So the commandant says, "Then stand up and come over here and face me." The poor guy stands up, makes 3 or 4 steps, and his knees gave out from under him. He falls. As soon as he falls, the commandant goes over and shoots him. He had 3 dead bodies, and Ben Lesser is next in line. I remember walking up to that sawhorse, tiptoeing, bending over, not touching the 2x4, and my heel should not touch the ground. One man is pulling my trousers real tight. The other one starts to hit, and I start to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Finally, now every time they hit me, there was a line of blood coming right through the trousers. They hit you so hard with those sharp 1 by 1 inch. 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. I made it. You could hear a pin drop in that camp because nobody believed that anyone could make that. The man who was holding my trousers says to me in Yiddish, he says, "Go over and thank him." So I stand up, blood is running down the back of my legs. And I walk over to him and I salute him and I say, "Danke schön, Herr Kommandant." When he hears that, he puts his hand on my collar, my shirt collar, twists me around facing the number 10s who are still to be beaten. He says, "Now I told you it could be done. If you do it like this, Junge, you have nothing to worry about." And while this is going on, there is a commotion at the gate. They caught those 3 inmates and they were pulling them in, bloodied, you couldn't recognize them. When the commandant saw that, just like a child gets sick of a toy and throws it away, he tells us number 10 to all go back in our original line. He orders his henchmen to bring down a portable gallows. They had a portable gallows, and we all had to watch how they hung each one individually. I remember the last one, they put the noose on him. He started, he was religious, I guess. He started to say a Hebrew prayer, Shema. It's only 6 words, the Shema, anyone who hears it, Shema Yisrael, and 6 words. They wouldn't let him, they kicked the stool out from under him. They wouldn't let him finish his last 2 words. Such sadists. And then it's like nothing ever happened. We had to eat, get our ration, go back to the barrack. For days of, I don't remember, weeks, time didn't matter. I couldn't sleep on my back. I had to sleep on my stomach because of the welts that I had all over my back. One night we heard cannon fire. And that morning when we report to go to work, there's a loudspeaker says, no one is going to work today. The camp is being evacuated. Line up in rows of fives and start marching out. That was a death march. My uncle was already in the kitchen. We couldn't say goodbye to him. We don't know what happened to our uncle. We never heard from him again. And this is when the death march started. And this is, I recently found out it was 7 weeks. I lost count. 7 weeks marching, our shoes fell apart and we had to march on snow. To this day, I have a problem with the bottom of my feet. I have to sleep in sleeping bags, hot, heating pads, hot heating pads every night, winter or summer. And we arrived into Buchenwalder. You know the rest. Once we were in Buchenwalder, overnight, the next morning we had to report, and they put us in cattle cars. And in that terrible train ride, I didn't know how many people, but Professor Soller told us that it was about 6,000 people there. This picture was taken from me in Buchenwalder when I was in the Buchenwalder in the bed house. That night we could take a bed. Now I have no idea who took the picture because nobody had the camera. The Nazis, the soldiers had cameras. I must have been a soldier. I always do my best, not just good, but absolute best. So when I was in the labor camp, if they asked me to do something, I always aim to please. But I don't think that this is, I had the will to live. I had the will to live. I was so young. I had a whole life ahead of me. And I see everybody dying. And it's also possible that I lived because I wanted to see my cousin, the death march, survive. I wouldn't let him die. No, I'll drag you along. You have to live. And you can't, he wanted to sit down in the snow, everybody passed, they'll shoot him. No, I wouldn't let him. Now it's possible, it's very possible that I was alive trying to keep him alive. And it's also possible that he was alive trying to keep me alive. And as soon as he was liberated, he felt I'm alive, and he let himself go to die. And he died the night of liberation after he felt I was free. It's possible, I don't know. It's possible that we each looked out for each other. And that kept us going. There were times, well, liberation was one thing. We were cheered up, even though we were 75% dead, but we were liberated. Americans, we kissed their boots. You liberated us, we're free. What liberation held for us wasn't very good, because those political prisoners that they held in Auschwitz, they were cheering and jumping for joy. We Jewish people couldn't jump for joy. They had homes to go back to, families to go back to. We had no place to go back to. What now? All right, so we're free, we're liberated. What next? We have no homes to go back to, no family to go back to. Nobody knows anybody. It was a very strange life. But when I woke up in Saint-Otilien, I was a whole new person. First of all, I had some strength that came back to me because they fed me intravenously, but I was feeling stronger. And I joined an organization of pioneers, Zionist pioneers, this organization. And this is me here. That's right. That was me. And I joined this organization with a friend of mine. My hand is on top of his shoulder. Yeah. The two of us joined this organization, and we were chosen to go to Palestine. And our aim was to fight for the land from where we were dispersed 2,000 years ago, Judea. And this was our homeland. And we knew if we had our own country, the Holocaust would have never happened. But as it was, nobody cared about the Jewish people. So here, there was the Holocaust. No one would care if you kill, you don't kill. Nobody gave a damn. So that's the reason I had a reason to start living again. And that was the time that I felt important. Good. I'm a Zionist. I'm a pioneer, and I'm going to go to the land and eventually have our own country. So I had a purpose in life, something important to do. And the next thing that was the best part of my life, how I met my sister Lola. It's unbelievable. It's like God's hand, how she brought my sister to this hospital and why I went there to say goodbye to somebody and she was in the next bed. It's a whole story in itself. Please, you have to read about it because that was a miracle of miracles. Out of millions of people in the world, my sister winds up in a hospital bed next to a friend of mine who also happened to be a pioneer, but she got sick the night before she left to go to Palestine. So we went to say goodbye to her. And when I'm sitting on her bed and talking to her, I had to wait 2 hours till the bus came to Saint-Otilien to pick me up. So I sat there 2 hours, and I didn't pay attention to all the ladies, but the woman next door paid attention to me. And after I left, she said, "Rachel, who is that young man who was sitting on your bed with the wavy black hair? He reminds me so much of my brothers." "Oh, his name is Benjamin." "Benjamin? Do you happen to have a picture of him?" She says, "Yes." And she had a picture the picture which you just saw a few minutes ago. And she takes a look. She screams out, "Ben, it's my brother Ben, Ben, he's alive, he's alive." She started to scream. Her husband heard it and he came running in. And what happened from that point on is too long of a story. But I was on my way already to Palestine, and the last minute before boarding the ship in Marseille, I found out that my sister is alive and she's in a hospital in Saint-Otilien dying. And her dying wish is to see her brother. Well, my whole life turned around, and that was a time when I saw my sister, and I found out she's not dying, she's pregnant. She's in her 9th month and expecting a baby any day now. It was a turn around in my whole life. We begin again. There's my little nephew, my sister, my brother-in-law. This is when our family began again, a newborn child to the family. It was so emotional, one thing after another, and then coming to America. And of course, I don't have to tell you, falling in love and with my Jean, my she's the love of my life. This is after 70 years. It's now 71 years that we are married, and we have a new family, 4 daughters. Here we show only 4 grandchildren and 3 great-grandchildren, but now we have 5 great-grandchildren. It all started with hate, and shows you if you hate, whether it's because you're Jewish or you're German or you're Polish, doesn't matter. If you hate somebody well strong enough, it's easy to kill. I'm sure that the German people were highly intelligent, and they were cultured people. They certainly knew what's right and what's wrong. Yet hate could convert those people into making them killers. So it's the hatred, which has something that has to stop. Why hate? You know, hate and love are both contagious. Choose love. Choose love.